Our second monthly meeting of the Hendersonville City Council, Wednesday, May 25th, 2022. Start with a moment of silence, meditation for the families that are going through the unthinkable in Raleigh, Texas, and remembering the people who were killed in the Top supermarket not 10 days ago. Thank you. Okay, start out with some presentations. Budget, special appropriations. Who's going to?
So, Mayor Volkman, City Council, I'll turn this over to Assistant City Manager Ryan Pauley, I believe.
Madam Mayor, members of City Council, this should be relatively easy compared to our last budget meeting. We got 10 slides this time, not 111. So, we'll go ahead and jump in. During the special appropriations process, we heard feedback from various council members that they wanted to see a couple items changed as we were going through it kind of towards the budget workshop. So based on that direction, we heard that the total special appropriations should evolve with the budget as the budget increases. There should be some capacity for special appropriations to increase with it. And then we also heard that we'd like to see various services from arts and culture to health and human services kind of be separated into categories, and that way they're competing against, you know, apples to apples comparisons versus apples to oranges. So we have tried to do that here, and we'll go through a couple quick slides to brief the council and then seek direction. So based on what we looked at, what we did is we took the past 5 years of historical data that City Council has appropriated and what's been requested, and we looked at the different amounts. And ultimately, based on total expenditures, we felt that a 0.5% of budget would be a good starting point. That generates around $115,681 for FY23's budget of $23 million in expenditures. And we'll look at some of the historical on that shortly. Also, we are recommending allocating the subcategories into 4 areas: arts, culture, and recreation, economic and tourism support, education, health, human, and animal services. And lastly, we'd recommend maintaining the full funding list of items deemed necessary by the city to include in our budget and maintain that in our existing policy. When looking at historicals, this pie chart breaks down the requested dollars into those categories. So this is a 5-year average. So over the past 5 years, Health, Human, and Animal Services has requested on average $143,000 per year, or about 56% of the total request. Arts and Culture being the second largest at about $98,000, or 38%. And then Economic and Tourism Support 3.2 and Education 2.7. So when you look at it from requested, then we say, okay, what did council actually do? And you got to the approved level. You can see about $70,000. You know, normally we're appropriating $100,000 total. About 70% went to health, human, and animal services. 21,500 on average, or 22%, went to arts, culture, recreation. 5,000 to economic and tourism support, and 2,000 to education. And just rounding those off, I kind of want to just present it in a way that we're going to look at for our recommendation here. So about 70% in health and human services, 23% arts, recreation, culture, education 2%, and economic and tourism support 5%. So when you look at that, you can see what was requested for FY23 in the middle column there. You can see $25,000 was requested in economic and tourism support. Under this current recommendation, that would equate to about $5,784 available for that category. Arts, culture, and recreation, $127,000, $26,000 available. Education, $3,500, $2,300 available. And health and human and animal services, $197,000 were requested, and about $81,000 would be available to appropriate. When looking at the past 5 years, here's the actuals broken out if we were to use that half percentage point. So you can see back in FY18, using the half percentage, we would have had about $77,000 available for appropriation, and you can see how that would have been broken out over the years. You can see in FY22 our actuals, that's actually pretty close to what we were doing in FY22 from what actually happened based on the $100,000 recommendation, and you can see the growth up to $115,000 in FY23. So with that, really from our perspective, a policy revision to include a percentage-based increase for the special appropriations and have it be based on that on the total expenditures of the budget, and then broken out into subcategories would be our recommendation today. From this, we would ask that council go out and then re-review, re-rank requests in their certain categories, and we would move forward from there. So at this point, I'll stop and take any questions or direction from council. Yeah, Jerry.
So in the, whoa, please put that back up. In the comparison of the requests and the categories in which they fall into, what is the difference in human services and education?
So education would just be very specific educational related scholarships. We have requests like that fall into their own category. We could group those into the same category if we wanted to.
Okay, right.
Some years we have more in education than others.
Yeah, I think I can just see where that particular one and human services are very fluid in what exactly, like for example, if Blue Ridge asks for help with something, is that necessary? That's at Blue Ridge Community College, not Blue Ridge Health Service.
It's not necessarily the organization asking, it would be the function of the program that they're asking for, is what we're looking at.
Right, okay. And I guess there is a little bit of devil in the details as far as what is something is classified, how something is classified.
Correct, yeah, we're making that recommendation as staff.
Is there any thought to separating animal services outside of human services?
There's really only one animal service request, so we lumped it in with everything else. Otherwise, it would kind of fall into a small percentage category and probably not, from what we looked at, you probably wouldn't be happy with the amount of money it would receive under that percentage breakdown. So we grouped it in with everything else with a bigger bucket.
Okay. My next comment is for council, not a question, so I'll save that.
Okay. Well, I guess I don't see the need to divide up into categories. Some years we get more requests, just because this is the average over so many years, I just don't feel any need to figure out what category various people are in. If they have a need this time, I might want to give them more this time than last time. So I think that makes it more complicated than simplifying it. Comments, questions?
I agree with you.
Okay.
I mean, I see they're up there, but I don't know what problem we're solving with that. And as I'm listening today, I'm just thinking, okay, how something is defined becomes really important when they ask for money. And if next year we decide, we'd really like to spend a lot of money on Flat Rock Playhouse, I'll say, for example. I guess I can see where we want to fudge those numbers, not fudge, change those numbers, excuse me, change those numbers.
I think the only advice that we would give you is that the projects have to, for us to, and we are trying to be a little more diligent in making sure that the projects we are funding or the applications we are funded, that we are authorized to spend money on that. I think that's probably where the categories came from, is somewhat, but the idea is we really should only be spending money on what we have the authority to spend money on. And so if somebody just asks for a general contribution for operating cost, under the general statutes, we cannot fund that. But if it's for a program that goes to, literacy or low to moderate income assistance for housing, then yes, we can spend money on that. So I don't, you know.
John, just to expand on that, we can still monitor that if council's desire just to not group them in categories. What I thought I heard in May, and this could be my misconception, was that we didn't want to compare health and human services versus arts and recreation. But if that's not the desire of council, we are happy to go back the other direction.
Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Some of that can be me too, because I think I reached out to you and said, can we be funding all of this? Are we allowed to make, I don't know, determinations of preferences of nonprofits that we're donating to that are not directly feeding or clothing or sheltering or, something like that with a purpose? Because to me, that kind of gets into more of a personal preference of what we want to fund, and then is that the decision that we should maybe then go spend our time and volunteer or help that specific nonprofit out, as opposed to spending taxpayers' money on something that is not deemed, an appropriate usage of funding. And so that could have come from me too, part of the confusion, because I was questioning, can we do that, or what are we allowed to fund, and should we be funding, to an extent of some of the things that we do, or should we direct money towards, things that are, directly feeding or clothing or, helping our community out in that way. And I understand that arts is helping a community as well, but to me, if I have all the money to spend, I want it to go to a child or a family. I mean, so that was my opinion.
Well, I'll add to this. I think for me, 4 categories, I'm not criticizing them, is a little bit challenging. If it were 2 categories, I think.
How would you divide them?
I don't, yeah. But even then, I mean, I agree with you, Barbara, that regardless of the category, it's sort of like in that particular year, what do we think is a priority? And also, I think these would all be, I don't know if it's policy or not. If we wanted to change it, we could, which means we're back to what we started with. I guess I could also see where, like every game, people figure out this, and so when they're applying, they make a point to say, and this falls within the health and human services category.
Very true.
And when they're applying for it, to try to make sure they're in the big pot of money, I guess. But John asked to follow up with your comment. I mean, I would assume by the time it gets to us and the application's been made, if staff doesn't feel like this falls under our authority, I'm assuming you guys would tell us.
I think we're having that discussion. We're frankly tightening it down more and more each year because we're trying to educate the nonprofits on what we can spend money and cannot spend money on. And so, and working very hard the last several years on improving the contracts and making sure those contracts meet our statutory authority and document that and put specific performance measures. Madam Attorney, I don't know if you have anything you want to add to that.
Just to say, some direction from council with regards to some of the requests that may have come in a method that as asked we can't fund, but there might be some other program or something within that organization that could be funded. Do you want people to have to stick with what they submitted, or if you understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
Or do you want us to reach back out and say?
We don't want to violate the statute. I get that.
Right, absolutely. But if there's an organization that might have some other worthy, as part of this learning process that everybody's having to go through, do you want us to go back out and say, well, your application is not, doesn't qualify for, as presented, is there another project or program that you might want to submit to give them a second, as part of this community educational process?
May I ask a follow-up question?
Absolutely.
So with regard to determining whether or not a request falls within that fuzzy, I won't say quasi-judicial, quasi-governmental function, I'm assuming somewhere there's a law or regulation about that, which you've mentioned to us before. And I guess
So-
if you and John got together and said, this doesn't like it falls within it, and you told us that, I mean, I would take that obviously like, okay, we can't fund it like it is.
Right, and we are going to tell you that. It's just at what point you want to hear it. I mean, people submit, so the application is pretty clear up front, and it says we do not fund general operations, and that we only fund programs, and we only fund things that the city could do itself, or services that the city could do itself. But people still submitted for some things that didn't fall within that guideline.
And what happens when that happens?
Nothing has happened with those requests yet.
I see a sudden movement from the front row.
So, Madam Mayor, members of the council, when that happens, when a nonprofit applies and their program might not be something that falls under the city's jurisdiction to fund, we do contact those nonprofits and ask them if there's an alternative program that we could provide funding for. So we do follow up with those nonprofits.
We haven't done that yet, though, with this round, I wouldn't think.
Any nonprofits that have submitted an application, we've reached out and contacted the applicant and asked them if there's an alternative. So this year, I don't think we've done that, but in previous cycles we have.
Right. I'm saying this year, it doesn't appear that we've done that yet.
Correct.
Or if we have, nobody submitted an alternate.
Yeah, I think what's the kind of the conversation that's not communicating here is Angie reviewed several of them today, and there were a couple of them from nonprofits that have generally been supported by the city council, and they would not, as they're written today, would not meet the statutory requirements for us to fund as applications are designed today. And the idea is if we got guidance from council, we would go back to those groups and say, your application is not.
Per direction received at the last budget session, you guys asked me to go through and look at them, so I did that. But I have not communicated that back to you yet. To be just quite honest, I probably my own fault, didn't realize that this was on agenda today, so I did it yesterday and today. So I've just looked at them yesterday and today to try to be prepared, because I thought you were going to be going through requests today, but then I learned that's not today, that's for a future session.
It's all good.
Could you elaborate a little bit more on the scholarships funded?
Sure. Councilmember Roundtree, is there anything in particular you're looking for?
All this is new to me.
Scholarship. So there are a number of nonprofits that apply for scholarship-related
Okay.
funding. So two examples just off the top of my head, Blue Ridge Community College, and more recently
Boys and Girls Club.
Yes.
Part of their request is for scholarship money.
Yes. And also,
it has been in the past. I don't know about this year.
yes. And also the NAACP applied for some scholarship funds as well.
Okay. I have a question. So is it possible in this budget to say, we're going to spend, I'll use that much money on special appropriations and get this discussion straight before we divvy up the money? Or in the budget, does it have to state who's getting what? Because I would assume we would need to get this straight before we vote on the budget, which is next week.
You do not. You would approve a lump sum amount to go in the budget, and then you would vote on the budget. And with recent legislation that was passed, guidance from the Institute of Government, and it may not even be applicable here, but that if you serve on a board of directors for a nonprofit that has requested funded, you cannot vote or participate in any manner on that. So if there are any of those requests there, they recommend that you actually vote on the individual appropriations separate and apart from the budget, because otherwise you wouldn't be able to vote on the budget. And so that's kind of how we've approached it this year, is just to do a lump sum in your budget and then follow up with the individual breakout of funding requests.
Well, I think one thing that would be helpful, and I'm trying to remember this year's list. Okay, I apologize if I don't remember very well right offhand. We have an organization and we have amount requested, and like if they requested from the past. We don't have a very extensive list of the program on that list. Am I correct? I know that we could access it somewhere.
Yes, sir. So we work and try to summarize the value of
Right.
each application and distill it down to just a sentence or two.
Okay.
So we do have that available, as well as the larger application.
Where do we see that?
It's on the notes column.
So like under that,
Yes.
okay.
Okay, so there's a notes column. I apologize.
Yeah. Yeah.
I see that
It's
there.
a little hard to read it on the.
And that's on the, I know it's on that one. It's on the special appropriations one too?
On the spreadsheet.
It's on the spreadsheet one, okay. Right, because I guess we really need to pay more attention to that. I mean,
But if we were to approve that amount, we would have to raise taxes though, right? Because that's $300,000.
no, 115, 5, 6.
Oh, I thought you were talking about the far right, and I was like.
No. The one down there, the bottom one is including the, what we'll call,
So that's the full funding
full
list,
funding
and
list. Yes.
each year those organizations apply, and we've.
yeah, that's,
So we're not looking at the 399 number.
No.
well, we are in a sense of adding 115 to 399. I'm sorry, 115 to those numbers gets you 399. So this is like Apple Country Transit, things like that, things that we pretty much fund every year. That's what these are.
Yeah, okay.
So if I'm not correct, you add 115 to
I
that
thought you
number, you
were
get 399, correct?
Using that number as our,
No,
100,000.
no.
okay, sorry.
The number you're thinking of is 115.
Yes,
We don't, yeah, most of that we don't divvy up, it's already divvied up for
Yeah.
us.
okay.
Yeah, we fully fund all of the applications on that list, and they add up to that 399,518. And then there's a discretionary pot, which Brian is recommending the 115,681.
Right,
Okay.
Does that clear it up?
yeah. So these are the ones, almost like,
Yes.
it's just, we're going to do these every year. Like, we're going to fund the partnership, we're going to
Yeah,
fund the
yeah,
rescue squad.
And the only one that really fluctuates on that list, if I could clarify for the council, is just the Apple Country Transit. Typically fluctuates a little bit.
Because that's a function of population and something, isn't
Yes,
it? Yeah.
yes.
We're having fun. So I think, I know that I would very much like to hear your feedback on whether or not something falls within what we can do. Definitely before I vote on it.
Oh, well, you would get it before you voted on it.
And in the interest of time, because basically we have a meeting a week from tomorrow, if it's okay, I'll just say to council, I'd suggest we approve the amount, and then we have to approve who gets what at some point. I guess there's no, I mean, it's a check, so whenever we want to decide to send out the check.
Yeah. And, yeah, after July 1st and before June 30th. I mean, of course, the nonprofits have their desire, but we would,
Right.
we typically do it in the month of July.
It normally takes some time to get the contract
Yeah.
figured out and signed and the check cut. It normally takes 60 days.
We haven't heard from Lindsay. Is she okay with all this?
Yeah,
I'm here. Can you hear me?
yes.
Yes,
I was just so enjoying listening to you all. So I'm good with this amount. I think it makes more sense for there to be a percentage that we're doing instead of the lump sum year after year. I actually am in favor of the categories. I just worked with United Way on their grant funding program, and they had, obviously we can't do separate committees, it's not as big of a process, but they had different buckets that the money was coming from so that we are comparing applications of similar programs to each other as opposed to comparing, you know, an arts organization to a health and human services organization, because they're both important. But when you put them next to each other, you know, like Jennifer mentioned it earlier, one can seem to be more important than the other. And I think that funding the arts and culture and recreation and economic and tourism, I think that's very important for our community. So I would like to see us kind of work out this category thing a little bit more. Maybe we don't do it for this round because we're kind of making a lot of changes all at one time. And I think, you know, the applications that Angie's found that we necessarily can't fund because they don't fall under the right jurisdiction or categories, I think this year we should reach back out to them. If we can make our application more clear, I don't think that we need to continue to do that, because part of submitting the application is reading what all of the qualifications are for it. And so once we get those directions to be a little bit more clear next year, I think then that's it. But this year, I think it's fair to reach back out to them. And then maybe between now, this appropriation and the next appropriation, we can kind of work a little bit more on these buckets, and are the percentages going to change every year, and how does it work? And maybe it's 3 buckets instead of 4 buckets. But I like the idea of dividing them up. I think it would be helpful for me if we were going to do buckets that the spreadsheet is then divided up. And I think it would also be helpful to have a little bit more in the notes section. If there's somewhere in between the full application in 1 to 2 sentences, maybe it's a paragraph, summary of the program that they're asking us to fund, I think that would be helpful, because some of the notes are pretty brief.
What do you think about the buckets or the categories, Debbie?
I'm just trying to grasp.
Well, would you prefer that there be categories, or do you not prefer the categories, or you like them, or?
The categories are fine to me.
I could also see in the future that maybe the categories and the buckets are tied to our core values.
So maybe we allocate that money and then discuss it further?
Yeah, I mean, at this point, I agree. I mean, agree to the allocation amount, and then obviously we have some homework to do. I also just say practically, I know we have education there as 2%. I mean, if we're going towards categories, is that not a category that could just be lumped in with something else? You know, once again, I'm with the mayor that I'm fine without categories, but I would argue that 4 is more complicated, especially when one of them historically has only been 2%. To lump that in with something else, whatever that might be.
We can do that.
And so that's one
I think
bit of
that's a good
feedback.
idea. It does seem more simple.
Hearing that.
And then if education needed to be higher 1 year too, then
Right.
you've got some flexibility. I think,
I think you can make an argument that education falls under human services.
I agree.
Education falls up on the arts. That's true.
Well, and this is where the devil's in the details, right? Because if you're given a scholarship to go to Flat Rock Playhouse for drama camp this summer, you're right, that's straight up to arts. I agree with you, right.
We can narrow the categories if it sounds like there's a majority direction to move forward with categories still, but just narrowed down. In one no.
I think you said that correctly, that there's a majority direction.
Okay. And we're good with the half percentage. All right.
I have one question on the half percentage, and that is whether or not council will entertain 0.5 to 0.6%, just a little leeway in there if we wanted to change an amount, so that we would know we'd have between this and this if we wanted to, which would probably be about $15,000 more or so this year.
Yeah.
Just a thought in case we wanted to have that in there. Go ahead, you're going to say something.
Yeah, I mean, so if we're going to do that, I think where Councilman Member Smith's going is, and I would ask you that, or are you suggesting then in this particular case for this year that we increase it from 115,681 to 125 or 130? Is
Which
what?
125 would be actually 0.54. We did the math, figured that out. But in the discussion, Brian, I hope you don't mind, that I had with Brian, he brought up a good point. He said, which is, you might want a little wiggle room from 1 year to the next. And so if you had, from this to this that you could use, council could decide whether or not they wanted to spend it all or less. So that's the only reason I mentioned that as a policy.
Yeah, and ultimately,
He needs
it's
a dollar amount to stick in the budget.
No, I know that. So
And say, maybe it'll be this, or maybe it'll be that.
Well, okay, so I want to point out, though, that like in our budgeting, there are some things that have ranges. Like, for example, when we look at how much we think we're going to bring in revenue, we have best case, middle case, worst case.
Yeah.
So I'm just saying in this particular budget item, if we had some wiggle room in there, I mean, ultimately, we could do whatever we want.
I would always vote for the higher one, though. So if we can't afford to do a bump I mean, to me, if there's more money available to fund a health or human service item, I would want to always do that. So whatever the number is, I'm fine with, but I don't know if I feel comfortable having a range every time, because
Okay.
I would always choose the higher range. Or wouldn't we all? If that-
And
that
we've
was
also-
what we had?
That's why we're talking about it here together.
Yeah.
We've
So
seen
would you
that in
like
the
to just
past.
in
I mean,
general see it be more?
I just wish it were 125 this year. That's the number that I thought,
Jerry, I think that sounds like a great round number.
which will be 0.55%. No, I'm saying the percentage would be, or 0.54%.
I like 125. I like round numbers.
We put 125,000 in the budget, so we've got, right, it's a policy document. This is guiding what you all do. And ultimately, it's your budget, and, you have a budget officer who recommends it, and y'all are going to do as you please. We always recommend 100, right, for the past 5 years. We've not always done 100. We've done 105. We've done 106. So, we've got 125 in there for this year. I think this is a good guiding policy. Keep it narrow, focused as a policy decision, and then when we get in the room, you all make a decision on where you really want to be.
Okay, well then I recommend we bump the amount to 125,000 this year.
We'll have 125 in the budget on June 2nd.
Madam Mayor, may I make one technical legal point? So Brian clarified some of my confusion, because I knew this list was a lot shorter than what I had looked at, and he clarified for me these are the ones that are getting fully funded. So I recommend we go ahead and put those in the budget, since they're getting fully funded, unless you all sit on those, for the technical reason that economic development funds do require a public hearing, and so by including them in the budget, we've put in the notice. It includes economic development funds, so if that's in the budget, that kind of just crosses that legal T. So I would recommend go ahead and doing those in the budget.
Sure. Thank you.
Does that need a motion?
June 2nd.
Oh, okay,
It'll be in.
you don't need a motion today.
No, sir.
Okay.
We've got another slide, another topic. Sounds good. Good direction, good discussion. And I'll let John Conant take over from here.
So also at our workshop meeting, the city council had a good discussion about the establishment of a sustainability position. And I know the ESB, Environmental Sustainability Board, has been very interested, and it was their recommendation to have a sustainability position within the budget. And so, and they have made their recommendation to you that they preferred a senior level position dedicated specifically to sustainability items, opportunities, those types of things. City staff has took some time between the workshop meeting and this meeting and developed an alternative proposal that we, and the name of the position can change. It can be a variety of different, we can look at it a different way, but we would look at the position more as instead of a senior level department head type position, at least initially be a position, because we heard from a position that is more mid-management within our public works department, because we heard from the city council that you wanted a position that did have a focus on sustainability, but also parks development was very important. So we have developed for you kind of an alternative to the department head level position. This would be a position that in very many ways would be similar to a Mike Huffman type position within the public works department, that would be responsible for working on things, not only sustainability. They would work very closely with the Environmental Sustainability Board, the Tree Board, work close with Tom Wooten and Mark Steerwalt and the folks in the public works to focus on environmental sustainability items, as well as to help move our parks programming forward, our parks planning, parks grant applications, master planning, and those kind of things. So serve as a mid-level professional that would focus on all things associated with sustainability and parks, because we have a division within Public Works that does parks maintenance, and we have a building and maintenance facility group, and this group could really work with again our Public Works Director and our Public Works Superintendents to take that, those opportunities to a different level, realizing that at some point in the future, I could easily see that this position would be broken out into two separate positions, where one would be more focused on sustainability only, and one would be on Parks and Recreation in the future. So that is our proposal to you. Have those two options. Really just need guidance from the City Council on how you would want to move forward with this position.
Lindsay, I know you have strong feelings on this one.
I do. I sent all of our council members an email yesterday discussing this. And, you know, personally, I do feel that the Sustainability Board is correct and that we do need a manager level position to enact the plans that we're putting together with the sustainability plan, because it is a lot. But I also realize that this is us paving the way for that larger position. And I know after speaking with a couple of council members that it sounds that as a board we may feel more comfortable doing this hybrid position, which I am fine with. I am happy to make that compromise. A foot in the door is better than a door closed. I do have concerns that I shared with John earlier today. Excuse me. And my concern is that we're putting a lot on one position, and I don't want to set this person up for quote unquote failure. I doubt that they would, but it's just a lot to put on one person, and I want to make sure that we're giving them goals that are attainable. And that also makes me concerned that, you know, if we don't have the right pay grade assigned to something, we're asking somebody to do all of these different things, it could give us a lesser applicant pool. We may not get a lot of applicants, or we may not get as qualified of applicants. I can see this being somebody maybe that just graduated from college. It would be a great position for them to come in and help us really at the ground level form our plans and get better at things, and really do the long-term sustainability planning for the city. I know right now we have in the proposed budget a grade 21 sustainability manager, and I would ask that we would keep it at that grade 21, even if it is a coordinator, manager, whatever the title is. But just because of everything that we're asking them to do, I want to make sure that we get a qualified person that's going to be able to get everything done, you know, that we're asking them to do.
Would you be lowering it from 21?
So the proposal that I sent out earlier in the week, we had talked about lowering it to somewhat below 21, but we had a conversation today. As long as we can protect internal equity with other positions within the Public Works Department, we think we can keep it at, you know, somewhere around 19 to 21, based on the conversation we had with the HR director today. We just did not get down into, we want to make sure that people doing comparable work are getting paid comparable salaries, right? Just to make sure it's fair for everybody. So, but I think based on the conversation that we had, that we could keep it very close to pay grade 21 based on the conversation we did. And keep it at a salary rate that would be attractive to somebody like Councilmember Simpson is talking about.
I also think that this is one of those positions that we'll really have to pay a lot of attention to, make sure that we're doing check-ins with them. You know, how's it going? Is it manageable for them? You know, we check in with everybody when they do their annual reviews, but since this is a new position and we're kind of molding it and creating it as we go along, I think it'll be really important for us to keep our finger on the pulse of how it's going, to make sure that they can be as effective as possible and accomplish all the things that we'd like to see this person do.
I feel like with Mark Steerwald's background with Mountain True and his environmental work, he's going to be a good person, I think, to kind of help that person along as well, Lindsay.
Can you take the picture off of the screen? Yeah. So, I mean, we have talked a lot about developing a park at a downtown parking lot that will soon not be needed. So I like someone that's like, assigned to that project. I definitely like anybody that's assigned to writing grants, because that's very hard to do and do well and win. And then there's the sustainability aspect that's written up there as well. So I know that I'm satisfied that this is meeting some of the parks ideas that we had talked about, especially sort of the 10,000 feet looking down. We need some planning to this. So, I mean, that looks like a fun job.
Yeah, I'd like seeing us easing into it, and we can see where the pressure for the work is as we go along. If there are more projects toward the sustainability, might consider shifting things around even more. But I think this kind of hybrid position to start with in the first year is the way to go.
I think Mike Hoffman would be willing to help that person as well.
I will say too, like when I actually, Lindsay and I talked about a little bit about this last night, but when I called and researched with Boone, the city of Boone, just to get some information about their sustainability manager, Boone, a lot of the responsibilities that he has are already being done by various other departments here at the city, stormwater management and that kind of stuff. So we already have a step that we've been doing for, several years. So, I mean, we're already making really good headway. So I think that this is a good dip and, figure everything out from there. I will say, quick note about Mike Huffman, that I did request that he maybe get a John boat that we would like to maybe name the SS John C. For stream and river cleanup projects. The canoes are not cutting it. And if we had, I don't know how much a John boat costs. I can't think that they cost a lot of money. But something sturdier than the canoes that we were capsizing on Saturday with, heavy tires. And I think it could help him a lot, especially with trash trout programs and, any way to keep our waterways cleaner. I would really like to help support them.
We will encourage Mr. Huffman to request a John boat.
We toyed around with some names for the SS John boat, but thank you.
So I think we have clear direction on that. So those are the appropriate special appropriations in that position were the main things from a staff perspective we need clarification for today. At this point, I think we'll turn it over to the council and see if there's any other items related to budget that needs to be discussed.
Anything anyone wants to bring up?
I've learned a lot more than I did not know earlier today, so I do not have anything else I want to bring up.
All right.
So just for clarification, we will have your draft budget at your public hearing at your meeting next week. We are not proposing any sort of tax increase. We will proceed as the budget's been developed and with the guidance of the council and make a formal presentation, have the public hearing, and then wait for direction from City Council next Thursday night.
Okay. All right. If there is nothing further regarding the budget, we do need to enter closed session. Someone would like to?
Madam Mayor, we got to read something.
There is a motion.
Is that this one here?
Page 3.
Okay. The first page, under number 3? No.
On page 3, there's.
On page 3, excuse me. Oh, goodness. Sorry. Madam Mayor, the City Council enter into a closed session pursuant to North Carolina General Statute 143-318-11, A, 1, and 6 to prevent the disclosure of information that is privileged or confidential pursuant to the law of this state or of the United States, or not considered a public record within the meaning of Chapter 132 of the General Statutes, and to consider the qualifications, competence, performance, character, fitness, conditions of appointment, or conditions of initial appointment of an individual public officer or employee or prospective public officer or employee or to hear or investigate a complaint, charge, or grievance by or against an individual, public officer, or employee.
Okay. Is there any discussion? Not, need to call the roll for this vote. Those in favor of entering closed session, Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Ms. Hensley?
Aye.
Mayor, aye. Ms. Roundtree?
Aye.
Ms. Simpson?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Motion carries, and we are entering closed session. Thank you all.